Hello everyone, welcome back to another deck profile with me, Chocobilly, and this week I'm going to be looking at a deck that utilises a little engine which I've been a big fan of since it was released, but it was never really too powerful. But there's been a few cards over the recent sets that have made it a bit more playable and a lot of fun to work with. So I am talking about the Final Fantasy II engine, if you can really call it an engine. It's the Rebels, Warriors sort of thing going on. So this is the Anti-Empire Battalion. The reason I call it Anti-Empire is because there's a little bit of Final Fantasy XII in there as well, just to kind of keep the theme, I guess, but there's also some consistency with it. So I'll start with the backups because they are brief, and then I'll move on to the forwards, and then finally the summons as well. So first up, we've got backups. I mean, it's fairly obvious. There are 16, and they are all there really is. So there is 3 Class 8th Moogle, 3 Philo, 3 Varn, 2 Daj, 3 Yosef, and 2 Penelo. So the reasoning behind this is that obviously you will have a full backup line with each of these -1. So the idea really is that you want to have the 4 elements on board to be able to play the Warrior of Light, the 4-element Warrior of Light, of which there are 2 in the deck. Now you could argue that this is a little bit of cutting off your nose to spite your face a little bit, just to be able to play this card, but actually this card is so effective that I kind of think it's worth it. Also, these cards are also serve an alternative function. The only real backup that is only in the deck just to serve as a function for Warrior Light is the Class 8th Moogle, to be able to generate the Earth. I've gone over this in my card combo show about Warrior of Light, but Class 8th Moogle, Philo, Varn, and then any other fire backup allows you to be able to generate all 4 elements for the Warrior of Light. So Earth, Water, and then Fire, or Wind, to be honest, because Philo makes it so that both Philo and Varn can generate both water and wind, and then obviously Varn will also still be able to generate the fire, but then you want another fire backup online, so Varn could be the water, Philo could be the wind, Earth, and then fire. Daj, just because it's an EX, which hopefully gets something out of your hand, as well as just getting something decent into your hand. But it's a nice way to be able to just kind of accelerate it a little bit more. Yosef, it's an EX, it's 2, you're going to have 3 of them in the deck. And Penelo, just to be able to find either the Philo or the Varn. Now, actually, Varn's S ability isn't that bad. A S and a Dull to deal something 7k damage, you could ask for worse. And if you've already got both Philo and Varn down, playing Penelo to go find you that additional Varn, again, isn't so bad, because it means you're funding basically a summon to be able to hopefully shove something out of the way. But yeah, it's pretty standard. 9 times out of 10 it'll be Class 8th Moogle, Philo, Varn, and then one of the other 3. Or 2 of the other 3, sorry, because that's only 3 beforehand. So yeah, probably Yosef, probably Penelo. Daj is really just in there as a means of kind of accelerating further. If you've got Daj on the field, that probably means things aren't going quite to plan, because you will want Yosef and you will want Varn, which that means if you don't have either of these 2 on the field, you don't want to play Penelo, because then you won't be able to play these 2, at which point Warrior of Light is a dead card in the deck. So at no point do you ever want all 3 of these on the field. And to be honest, you always generally want Yosef, because Yosef combos with some of the other cards, which I'll go into now. So first up we have Maria in the forwards. Again, fairly obvious. She buffs all the rebel forwards you control by as many rebel forwards you control. So if you control 4 rebel forwards, they gain plus 4,000, and then obviously they take 2,000 less damage as well. And to be honest, that 2,000 less damage is really, really useful, especially up against fire or certain elements which like to do lots of chip damage, wind as well, because it reduces even more damage over time. And she is ultimately searchable off of the new Leon, which is really powerful. I was tempted to go for the backup Maria as well, but given how kind of the little package that I've got with the backups already, I'd rather kind of keep it as it is and use the forward Maria. Also, the forward Maria buffs all your forwards by generally more anyway, so it's better in my opinion. But yeah, being able to play the Leon onto the field to get the Maria is great. And Maria, again, generally going to be buffing all your forwards by a substantial amount. Next up we have Leod. So this is more about the fact that he's a warrior and buffs all warriors. So when Leod attacks, all the job warrior forwards you control gain plus 3,000 power until the end of the turn. 3k is a pretty significant amount, and at damage 3 he gains haste, so get him on the field, he immediately can go swinging. Your opponent doesn't answer it then and there. you're buffing everything. And there, like I said before, there is a rebel engine, but there's also some warrior stuff in here as well, which I'll go over a bit more. But ultimately, all of the 2 forwards, so Leon, Maria, Firion, Guy, all warriors, so all get buffed by Leod, but then there's a few other forwards in the deck which also make use of that effect. Next up we have Bards, so he's a wanderer and a warrior of light. So first up, he'll actually be able to gain a little bit of power from the other warrior of light because he shares a job with him. So that's quite nice. But yeah, Bart's obviously gains plus 2,000 power for each forward that he shares a job with. So playing onto the field, you can either go warriors or rebels. Generally, rebels is better because it gains the buff from Maria, and it also helps towards Guy's buff. Not Guy's buff, sorry. Leon's buff. Now, he doesn't help towards Guy's buff unless you make him a warrior, because Guy checks the warriors in the deck. Oh my god, this is getting tongue-tied. But most of the time, given that Bart's, when he becomes an element as well, can't be targeted by that, so he won't be able to be targeted by wind and maybe fire, who knows. It makes him quite hard to get around already. But then with Maria giving him that minus 2k when he becomes a rebel is really, really nice as well. And it's very easy for him to become very big very quickly. Right, Firion. So this is one of the reasons that I went down the route of Pinello and Tefilo and Devan and things like that, is that I wanted to use this Firion rather than the just fire Firion where you have to use crystal to make him bigger and whatnot, because this Firion is really easy to hit his effect when he enters the field. If you've got 5 more characters, gains haste and draws you a card when he attacks. Then obviously you can discard cards to give him plus 2k and then either make him stand up or give him first strike, which again, it actually happens fairly frequently. And if you've got something like Yuzuki or Warrior of Light, he will gain both effects. So he'll gain plus 2k, first strike, plus 2k brave, which is really good. But yeah, be able to get him onto the field, give him a constant buff through stuff like Maria to make him horrible to deal with, as well as also being able to discard to give him first strike or activate him is quite threatening. Being able to activate him when you've got so many forwards and to safely attack with him, draw you cards, is really good. And that's one of the good points about this deck actually. Things like Daj as well as Firion allow you to accelerate a little bit more and hopefully find cards to problems you might have. Hilda. So I didn't anticipate myself actually wanting to use this card, but she was really, really effective when she got played. That's the only problem. She never really got played that often. But if you can get Hilda down fairly early on, if you've managed to get your Philo and your Van and, you know, your Yosef maybe, having Hilda there, your opponent has to answer her very quickly, because she obviously can play a Scot onto the field, but she can just keep on getting back the the rebels from your break zone, so getting back the Guy, getting back the Leon, getting back Maria. Now, the one problem is that when you play stuff like Guy or Leon, they are searching from your deck, and every time if they're already in the break zone, they've probably already been played, which means they've probably already searched, so you don't want to, you know, lose those effects. But either way, being able to just get a 2 forward from the break zone add to your hand is also really nice for the Firion, because you can get yourself back a Firion, or it could be a a Guy or a Leon, so that you can then discard it for the Firion to then be able to give him the buff. But ultimately, she's actually quite a nice card, and the opponent does have to answer her, otherwise she starts getting very annoying very quickly. Right, Yuzuki. So this is focusing more on the warrior side of things of the deck, but it's still a really effective card. Being able to make so your fire forwards can't be dealt damage by abilities is really good, and then the water forwards you control, if they are dealt damage, it's reduced by 2,000 instead. So that means if you've got Maria on the field, and Maria, Yuzuki, and Firion, now if he takes damage, it's reduced by 4k, 2 from Maria's effect, 2 from Yuzuki's effect, and not to mention the fact that the fire element of him means that he also can't take ability damage. So he blocks, he might be pretty big anyway, but then he's also got this damage mitigation as well, so that's really good. But again, Yuzuki is a warrior, so it means that it can potentially buff the likes of Bart's, as well as working towards Guy's effect as well. She's generally a really annoying forward to have to deal with. Now, there's only one on the deck, you could probably make up to 2, but still really, really useful. Scott. Really just because I wanted to play him alongside Hilda as well, to play him onto the field. And, you know, playing onto the field to give something plus 3k, that's not too shabby. And then damage 3 when you split from the field to the break zone, you get to draw 2 cards as well, again adding to that kind of acceleration of the deck. Leon. So if you control 4 more rebels, Leon gains plus 4,000 power and haste, so that does include your backups as well, so that does include Yosef. So you can effectively play Guy onto the field, to play Yosef onto the field, get you a Leon to hand, maybe play the Leon to get a Maria to play Maria. Your Leon is now immediately at that 4 limit, so he gains plus 4k and haste. He's a surprisingly effective card, given the fact that he can kind of just as standard become 4k. Having Guy, Leon, and Maria or Firion or anything like that with a Yosef backup is a hell of a wall to put up. Now, it can be easily dismantled through the likes of Ixion, for example, but ultimately it's still a lot of big forwards. Now, the one thing that this deck really lacks is just kind of outright kill power, so you don't have too much in the means of, I don't like that forward, kill it. You just generally put up a big wall and attack through with it. So there is that kind of acceleration element to this deck. You might argue there's a something to be had with putting something like Goblins or Belias into the deck to give the forwards that don't have haste more ability to gain haste. But either way, Leon getting big alongside the other forwards getting big, and Maria also giving him an additional buff as well is really, really good. Ward, so only a one-of, but actually helped me a couple of times. Giving all your warriors plus 2,000 power is fantastic, and like I said, pretty much every forward in this deck is a warrior. So just playing on the field, give everything plus 2k. I like it. Ricard. Now, this was a surprise because I actually just forgot about this card because it's very, very forgettable, but his effect is actually really, really good. If you control a 2 forward other than Ricard, Ricard gains plus 1,000 power, and summons and abilities of your opponents must choose Ricard if possible. So, when you've got a massive board up front, we've got a guy who's something like 16 or 20k power, a big Leon, Maria, and maybe even Firion. That's pushing it a bit. But then playing Ricard, saying you now have to target my Ricard before you can get rid of any of these other big forwards, actually poses a big problem for your opponent, because you've got these forwards that can attack through, probably isn't going to be blocked. Maybe just keep on attacking with Firion to keep on drawing you cards, and your opponent can't do anything about it. So yeah, Ricard being a little a little bit of a lightning rod is really effective. You could say maybe it's worth running something like Oran in the deck, because you do have the means of playing him onto the field with the few water forwards and also some water backups. But ultimately, Ricard is a 9k that has to be targeted as well, so he's not able to just be Brynhilded and immediately got rid of. Your opponent has to do a bit more to actually get rid of him. Warrior of Light. Yeah, it's a fantastic card. It can just come onto the field, reactivate everything, kill some stuff, be huge, attack through, and it kind of fits the theme of the deck, right? Is the fact that you've got all these forwards that are massive, that are just going to be keep on swinging and be relentless at attacking your opponent. So, yeah. And then finally, we've got Guy. He enters the field, you can search yourself a rebel, play it onto the field, and that is literally any rebel. So you could go Guy into Yosef to get yourself Leon, to then play Leon, to then play Maria. It could be straight into the Leon if you've already got Yosef. So Guy into Leon into Maria. It could be Guy into Firion as well if you've already got Leon and Maria on the field. You know, there's so many different ways you can play it. And it might also be the fact that you've just run out of your Leons. You saw loads of them really early, had to discard them to play backups. So then Guy straight into Maria ain't too shabby either. And yeah, finally on to the backups. So Chocobo, just means of protection, you really, really need it in the deck. There might be something to be said about having something like Althea in the deck, but again, I wanted to keep the backups as is because they function really, really well, and you have everything you need right there. So Chocobos to be able to save your Marias and Firions and things from just an Ixion or being killed really quickly before they can get their effects off. Amaterasu, because it's Amaterasu, right, you just... it is what it is. Salamander, so being able to deal 5k to everything on the board is quite nice, especially when you've got a lot of smaller forwards. But it's also in here partially because I wanted untargeted damage. So it might be a case of your opponent's got something that can't be blocked, or they've got some sort of lightning rod where you can't get around it. Just being able to attack with something, they're like, okay, then I'm just going to block this other forward, you can't target it. Salamander, just to deal board-wide damage, is really nice. Now, obviously, you probably are going to struggle to get to Salamander's effect to be able to deal 7k to all the board, given that there's, what, 29 cards. Well, you know, that's 2/3 of the deck, so maybe it won't be too hard. But pretty much every single time I played Salamander, I never got a chance to use this effect. And there's also, you know, if you've got Hilda on the field, you don't want to be removing things like Firion and Leon from your break zone, so be mindful of that. But ultimately, being able to do untargeted damage to the opponent's board and also giving yourself maybe a bit of a buff as well. Using that alongside something like Warrior Light's First Strike or even Firian's First Strike is really, really useful. Finally, Bahamut. So again, it can be not targeted. You target 2 things instead of 1, but being able to do 10,000 or even 15,000 to 1 forward just to get rid of it, because you know that's pretty much most forwards are going to die. But then choosing 2 smaller forwards to get rid of them, you know, this is very useful for when you are blocking. Maybe you've got a smaller forward, something like Scott isn't great, but you're going to get the 2 cards back from it. You then cast something like Bahamut or Salamander Eva, and then you kill their forward as well as getting cards to your hand as well. And that is the Anti-Empire Battalion. There is a lot that can be done with this deck. The summons can really be revitalized. Like I said, there might be something to be had about putting Beliases in here, or even maybe some different monsters. Having the, what's it called? 2-headed dragon might be really good, because you've got these 2 massive forwards that are, or you've got loads of massive forwards that are quite problematic for your opponent, and when they attack, you're then also getting 4k pings off of that as well. Maybe putting in the Jin could be worth it as well. But ultimately, I just wanted to throw in, I made this really quickly, but it was actually quite effective for the amount of time I poured into this. But it's just a lot of fun. It functions really, really well and quite quickly. The only thing I'm a bit sad about is the fact that Hilda doesn't get to be played onto the field as often as I would like, but when she is there, she does work really well. Again, though, you just need to be mindful, because this deck is very prone to something like Ixion. I know I've said it like 3 or 4 times now, but it is, and that's something to be careful of. And a lot of the forwards can be quite smaller as well. So it's just a case of managing to maintain that aggression and maintaining that huge board state. So yeah, but one of the great things about it is that it does build really quickly, and that it can kind of regenerate itself a bit quickly as well, using things like Hilda, or even potentially something like Guy to then just go find the forwards as soon as they die. If Guy dies, they know you're going to replay it, you're going to get to play more things onto the field, you all getting just more Yosefs onto the field. There could be something to be said about having some backup breaking to break Yosef to then play another Yosef. But there's also a fair amount of EX, well, I'll say a fair amount of EXs, there's 5 EXs in the deck, but then that's 2 Daj and 3 Yosef. But when you do hit those, because you always seem to hit Yosef, again, finding that forward to hand, even when it's not already dead, is a great way to just threaten your opponent and be like, look, play this thing back onto the field, and it's going to really screw with you. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the deck. How would you change it up? It's a really fun deck to play. It's not too expensive. You got things like Firian, obviously, in the deck, and Warrior of Light, which are pretty costly cards, but they can be subbed out for other Firians or other cards, whatever you want to play with them with, and it still functions well, because to be honest, Warrior Light and Firian, really, really good cards, but I didn't play them as often as I thought I would, so you could easily put other stuff in here. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. How would you change this deck up? Anyway, thanks for watching, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.